Caroline Zamora.
And I'm Krystal Chavarria-Gonzalez.
We're your hosts. We talk about children and family therapy services, along with all the great things that Aprendamos Family of Services offers.
We talk to experts, therapists, and instructionists to provide information and resources for you and your family.
This is the Children and Families Podcast on the Aprendamos Podcast channel. Hello to all our listeners. I'm Caroline, your host, and I'm joined by Krystal, our co-host. How are you, Krystal?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Caroline?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Today we have a really special guest. We have Abel Covarrubias, who is our Chief Executive Officer, and we are going to talk about a new initiative that we have going on within the Aprendamos Family of Services in collaboration with our community. So welcome, Abel.
Well, thank you, Krystal and Caroline, for having me here today. Yes, Abel Covarrubias. I'm first and foremost the son of immigrant parents who came here from Mexico many years ago to come and live the American dream. I'm also a father of three beautiful little girls, Alexa Ray, Avery Sophia, and Nyla Jade. I'm a brother to, I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers, and I have my lovely wife, Monica, who has supported my crazy ideas the last 15 years. And I have an amazing team at Aprendamos.
Yes, so I know if you've been following our podcast, I think our very first 2 episodes, it's a pretty long podcast because it is our first 2 episodes, but we really talk about your backstory. So I want to encourage you, if you want to hear more about Abel's story, to go and listen to episodes 1 and 2 of our Children and Families podcast, because we really get in depth to why Abel started Aprendamos, and of course, you know, we talk about your inspirations and things like that. But today's podcast, I'm really excited about it because we're talking about a brand new initiative, and that is our Advancing Social Equity Initiative. And this is a grant that, you know, we've kind of been talking about starting this initiative with the Community Foundation for a while, and then 2020 happened and we were like, okay, let's just do it. But what was your inspiration for starting all of this?
I guess, Krystal and Caroline, first and foremost, I really want to thank the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico for being that foundation to help individuals like myself and my family carry out their dreams of really paying it forward and planting that seed for our community, for our nonprofits in the community and future generations. And I think it was a golden opportunity. I think in 2020 at the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, we received a lot of donations from donors that potentially we were not aware existed in our community. We've always known that Las Cruces is a giving community. And I know sitting on the board of the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, 2020 was our best year. People opened up their hearts to really give back to our community during the pandemic. And it was during this time that I reflected on all the gifts that my parents were given, you know, the opportunities that they were given when they came here from Mexico to live the American dream, and the sense of community that they were surrounded by in terms of the individuals in their small farming community of Array, 200 residents, and really faith, compassion, integrity, love was really the cornerstone of everything they did, and it was beautiful to see. And I was reflecting, you know, when you were during the pandemic, you had a lot of time to really sit and think and reflect. You went into a space of where there was a lot of unknowns, a sense of fear, a sense of loss. So as human beings, we became very vulnerable. And so for me, I had a lot of time to think and reflect on all the gifts that I have in my life, and the gifts that my brothers and sisters and my family has been given throughout the 40 plus years of my life. So I said, how can we pay it forward? So I really wanted to honor my mom and my dad and those that have come before me in terms of paying it forward and potentially starting an endowment where we would be able to award 2 nonprofits that were doing work around equity and building equitable practices within their organizations. And so really that's kind of what planted the seed in terms of me connecting with Tara Winter at the Community Foundation, and one of those other crazy ideas that I have that everybody embraces, but I truly feel it's an opportunity to honor those that have come before me.
And it's funny that you say that, because not that you have crazy ideas, but you do have a lot of ideas. In fact, the running joke is don't let Abel go on vacation because he's going to come back with a new company.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He gets that spark of creativity when you go on vacation. If you really think about it, it's that break. that spark of creativity where taken outside of your day-to-day routines and your work environment, and you get that inspiration if you're at another state or you're on the beach, and it's that spark that Abel still has in our organization that leads us to do these amazing initiatives in our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's really exciting about this this initiative, and so again, this is the Advancing Social Equity Initiative, and like Abel said, we're giving out 2 grants. Specifically, I'll go ahead and run through the specifics of the grants real quick, and then we can go ahead and talk about it some more. But we are going to be giving out 2 grants. Each is going to be $5,000, and they're for nonprofits that have annual revenues of under 1.5 million. So these are smaller nonprofits, not very large, big medical nonprofits or anything like that. These are smaller organizations. And on top of the $5,000, it is a year grant, so you have a year, but you're going to be getting a lot of in-kind resources from Aprendamos, and of course our network of people that we've met and we've gotten to work with, such as Ivy Child and Rose Krystal with Ivy Child and her resources like Christine Robinson, which we'll go ahead and talk about in a little bit. But those are basically what you need to apply, and of course completing the application. But again, it's $5,000 for nonprofits that have an annual revenue of under 1.5 million, and they have to be located here in southern New Mexico.
Caroline, I think you bring up a really good point, because the $5,000 will help any organization in terms of fulfilling their dreams and aspirations that carry out their mission and vision of the organization. But this morning I woke up, all know that I'm an early person, so I woke up and I'm reading a book about John Lewis, Carry On, Reflections for a New Generation. And it was amazing, as I was just thinking about this podcast. He stresses about the importance of mentorships and looking for people in our communities, to find those mentors, and using those mentors as a sounding board to help give us direction and guidance, to be able to ask questions, And he talks about we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And when you talk about the golden opportunity to have Rose as part of this initiative and Miss Christine Robinson, they have so much knowledge and so much, there's a golden opportunity to be mentored by them and really honor what is already existing in the nonprofits in our community, honoring the gifts and the great work that's happening, and really share those gifts and aspirations, and really truly look at what we're doing here locally in terms of really addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then have these great mentors as a sounding board is just an amazing. I think that's more than the $5,000 is what the nonprofits are going to get. You're looking at probably at about $25,000
I think at a minimum
worth of support that these 2 nonprofits are going to receive.
Absolutely. And so, I'm going to run through that real quick about what the nonprofits are going to receive. Again, it's the $5,000 plus you're getting this in-kind wealth of knowledge working with Ivy Child and Rose Krystal, who has worked with organizations like Google, these like in the Ford Foundation, just her and her wealth of knowledge, I think is just going to be invaluable. And then also Christine Robinson, who Rose introduced to us, and Christine, the work that she's done. She worked for the Obama administration. She's worked also for the Ford Foundation. She has been with really impactful organizations who are changing the world. And so just their wealth of knowledge, plus our resources as I'm going to call us, one of the leading organizations in New Mexico when it comes to early childhood education. And so on top of, working with Ivy Child and Rose and Christine, you also have Aprendamos and what our knowledge and what we have. Mm-hmm. And so I think organizations, these nonprofits, are just going to have a lot that they can pull on and a lot of things that they'll be able to learn.
Mm-hmm. And my vision, Caroline, is in terms of mentorship, that these nonprofits are going to serve as mentors for other nonprofits in our community. And so it's that whole idea of paying it forward that I think is extremely important. We have such a giving community, and everybody has so many gifts and talents that they need to share, and we just need to create spaces to allow those individuals to show us what gifts they bring to the table and talents, and really at the end of the day help our nonprofits carry out their mission and vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Krystal, you have anything?
I think it's just exciting, Caroline. I think you realize what the initiative offers as far as, that $5,000, but really taking into consideration all the in-kind support and guidance that, we're going to receive from, our two, I would like to say that, they're part of our Aprendamos family. Abel's built their relationships with them, which then in turn trickles down to the leadership team and us building those relationships with them, and how it's going to impact our community by paying it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was part of the goal when we were really starting to talk about this, is that, yes, we're kind of starting this conversation of advancing social equity and advancing equity within nonprofits, but really it's that community spread. And like you said, it's that mentorship. And how do these organizations then take the knowledge that they gain here and then spread it out to whether it's clients that they're working with or other organizations that they work with, which I think is really important. It's that community spread, in the best community spread in the best way possible. I know we're in a COVID world right now, but community spread in that sharing these ideas and knowledge, I think is really, really part of the goal.
Right. And then what a great space to be able to tell our story. Because we all show up with our own story, our own dreams, aspirations, struggles, and challenges, and opportunities. And what a golden opportunity to bring these two nonprofits and those that are involved in the nonprofits to share their story and what they think diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice looks like in their own personal lives and how they've been impacted, and what it looks like in their organizations. And how can we all together help co-create what that means for our community. And so I think it's a golden opportunity to really plant that seed and go into a space of vulnerability and humility to say, hey, I don't know this and it's okay, but I'm going to lean on my community partner to help me learn this, and we're on this journey together.
Absolutely. And so since you're already kind of talking about that, how about we go ahead and talk about what all these things mean to us? Let's start off with diversity, and I'll go ahead and give you the definition that we're going to be using as far as when it comes to this grant, and that is that diversity includes all the ways in which people differ, and it encompasses all the different characteristics that make one individual or group different from another. So what does diversity mean to you? And do you have a personal story about diversity?
Well, I just remember my dad's golden rule, you respect those regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, and you never know when you're going to meet that individual. And you really need to humble yourself regardless of the position you hold or the amount of money in your bank account or the car that you drive. We're all humans and we need that connection in order to survive as human beings, and relationships are extremely important. So for me, I remember my dad always, he came here as a migrant farm worker, and thanks to God, he was able to own his own business. And no matter how high he went in terms of the, owning his own business, he always honored every individual that he met, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity. And to him, the relationships was the most important piece, was building those relationships and finding the common ground, because they all had stories, and finding that connection. So to me, diversity is honoring who we are as human beings. And to me, I just recall those, I guess, behaviors that my mom and dad modeled. And sense of giving and just being inclusive with whoever came before them.
Yeah. So Krystal, what does diversity mean to you?
I think diversity, first and foremost, the first word that does come up to me is just the respect. Like Abel said, that respect for the individuals that we come, in contact with. I think just growing up as a child, and even as adults, have always been very, very social. Really played along with everybody, really got along. And I think, growing up at the time, Caroline, the time that we grew up, we really didn't think about, race, ethnicity. You really didn't know what your friend's story was like behind the scenes. All you saw was at school, or, what we talked about, let's say on the playground. And you think about it, I'm putting that in a child perspective, because now as adults, we see, as adults, we have these conversations, we know their stories, but we don't know truly what they have. behind the scenes and what they're going through in their life, but it is treating everyone with respect and allowing them to be who they are and honoring that and hoping that they accept you for who you are, regardless of what you bring. Like you said, Abel, regardless of what car you drive, what position you hold. It's like we're not here to have a title war of power, but it's just that overall respect, that we have for each other. And it's thinking about the world that we grow up in now and the children that we're bringing up in this world and just the conversation that's out there now that as a child, it probably was there, but we didn't get into it. The race, ethnicity. And yeah, you can say I had a great diverse group of friends growing up from elementary school. And of course, for college, you get a whole plethora of different ethnicities and family backgrounds. And you honor that. You honor who they are.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I feel like, when Krystal and I were growing up, I feel like we never talked, and it wasn't really in the news, was like race. It was like, I don't remember it being in the news. And now I'm sure kids growing up now, it's always in the news and it's almost like a constant bombardment. And so now it's really a part of their world.
So a fun fact, if our listeners don't know, Caroline and I have known each other since 5th grade.
Yep.
So our conversation in the playground was the Golden Girls.
I was going to say that.
That we still watch till this day. So, think about that. Think about the simplicity of our lives, even though, where we are now to what our children and now as adults, what we're experiencing in this world of, social justice and equity and diversity and
we're not saying that kids shouldn't be exposed to it and that we shouldn't be talking about it. Just that I hope that we're having healthy conversations around it. But I think, now that I'm older, I'm so lucky, and I think you're right, Krystal, when I got to college, like my group of friends and my circle of friends, even to this day, is very diverse.
Absolutely.
We're like Hispanic, we're white, Jewish, African American, and so it's just like my group of friends is so diverse, and thank goodness, because it just makes you like see the world through their eyes.
Yeah.
Right. And what a golden opportunity to learn from others.
Yes.
I think really in reflecting and putting words to the behaviors that were modeled by my mom and dad, I really think that they were looking at things through a lens of abundance. They really saw people as just having gifts and talents that were being shared in our community, and we were learning from one another. And so I think that was the beauty, is that we weren't putting people in boxes or in hierarchy. We were all wanting to live the American dream and get ahead in life, and that was the beautiful thing about living in a small community.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know the next.
Can I say something real quick in regards to Abel's comment? Abel, is that seeing that, but seeing the individuals know that. Giving them that hope, like look at Abel as an example, coming from a small community with his families, having that support. Someone within the community looking at you and say, I can do that too, or I can aspire to bigger dreams. But then also too, we want to be able to still have them rooted by their community to give back. In a sense, like you have done, and you've been in that example, but to give those individuals hope in the smaller communities that they come from, or even bigger communities like Las Cruces, and knowing that you can still make an impact within your community.
Absolutely. Here we go. So the next term I want to talk about, actually the next two terms, are equity and inclusion. And so first I'm going to go ahead and give you all the definitions that we're going to be using for, under the grant. And that is, racial equity is the condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicted, in a statistical sense, how one fares, or a mindset and method for solving problems that have endured for generations, seem intractable, harm people and communities of color most acutely, and ultimately affect people of all races. And inclusion is authentically bringing traditionally excluded individuals and or groups into processes, activities, and decision policy making in a way that shares power. So what does inclusion and equity mean to you all? And do you have some, maybe a story from your life that you can kind of draw on?
Caroline, that's a really good question. And when I'm thinking of equity and inclusion, really it requires that we as human beings really pause and take the time to see things differently, think differently, and do the work differently, especially when we're working, I'm using the example, working with the families and children that we serve. We're very humbled and honored that families have placed that trust in us. So for me, as a human being, it's really looking at my core values and making sure that a lot of my decisions are aligned with my core values. And sometimes it's something that I work on every day, but really pausing and really looking at the systems that we have within the organization, in terms of are there barriers that we're creating for our colleagues to kind of advance their dreams, or even families, in terms of the onboarding process and delivering that service. So it's really being humble and acknowledging that we as human beings will make mistakes, but creating spaces within the company for us to have a conversation around systems and protocols that we have in place, and being willing to change and think differently, and really honoring where people are at. So it's also about creating spaces to listen to people and really listening to their story, their dreams and aspirations, and then kind of looking at our current systems and making sure, are we helping families get where they want to get, in terms of their dreams, in terms of that dream that they may have for their child. And then really inclusion, Caroline. For me, and Caroline and Krystal, it's about making sure who has a seat at the table, and making sure that we're providing opportunities for our colleagues. Not really even just people. Many times we think of, okay, this administrator needs to be at the table, this manager needs to be at the table. What about those that are actually providing the direct service to families? I mean, they're the ones that are hearing these beautiful stories from the families that they serve. Why don't they have a seat at the table? Same thing with our community partners. We need to, in my eyes, less CEOs at the table and more individuals that are doing the work. And that includes our stakeholders. The most important stakeholder, and I'm referencing this to our service that we provide, is having families at the table. Taking the time to hear their story, and potentially hear barriers that we may be indirectly placing, in terms of them fulfilling their dreams, and aspirations. So that's big. It's really pausing and making sure that we bring everybody to the table, and if we need multiple tables, then that's what we need to do. We need to bring as many chairs and as many voices.
Round table.
Yes. Yeah.
Krystal, what does equity and inclusion mean to you?
I think first and foremost, inclusion, for sure, having a degree in early childhood, we really focus on inclusive practice, especially within multicultural setting, including children, of course, regardless of using these terms from our collegiate level, intellectual, their eligibility, their special needs children who may have a developmental delay, which of course goes into the work that I do here at Aprendamos, but just including looking at, again, from a child's perspective, including them regardless of what they have on their IEP, what diagnosis they have, but including them within their same age peers. And as adults, we can look at it in regards to, like Abel was saying, our titles and our backgrounds, but ensuring that everybody is a part of the bigger picture and is part of the goal of what we're trying to accomplish, whether that be at school, whatever project they're working on, as a community, whatever initiative or, let's say, program that we're working on right now. And I think it's just hand in hand with equity. I sometimes get that confused, and I know we've talked about this before, with equality, where I think you had made a good definition, Caroline, and it stuck to me, but you can help me reiterate what bits and pieces that I got. But I know with equality, we are giving everybody, let's say, the equal amount of resources, okay? So looking at it like that. But with equity, some may need more in order to be at that same level as somebody else, for example. And that's really honed in and stuck with me, because I think those two words can get confused, with equality and with equity. But I think ultimately, going back to how Abel clearly defined it, is ensuring that we have all the right individuals at the table within our conversation. And it's digging deep to ensure that we have those people.
Yeah, and I think, Krystal, what you're talking about is the picture that that I shared with our leadership team, and that is that, like you said, equality is everyone gets the same size bench, step stool to step on.
Yes.
Everyone gets, it's a 12-inch step stool. Everyone gets that same. But some people, let's say they're a little bit shorter than the person standing right next to them, so they need a 24-inch step stool so that they can see the same thing. And that's equity.
Absolutely. That was the picture that, as I was talking about it, Caroline, that was the imagery that I was thinking of that you had shared with us at the leadership level.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll go ahead and post that picture with this podcast. So if you want to see a picture of it, you can check out our website, and I'll post a picture with this episode, so you can have a better visual of what we're talking about. But yeah, equality and equity are not the same thing, which I think is really important. And I think, especially when it comes to inclusion, it's are we having enough room for everyone to be at the table? And I mean that literally and figuratively. Like, are we making a space for people for all the people who need to be there, but also, I hope we don't make people not sit at the table. Like, I almost get mad at people when they don't want to sit at the table, and I'm like, no, pull up a chair and sit at the table. And so I think that's important with inclusion and making sure that we're making smart policy, and that we're making smart decisions, and that we're making decisions that are going to impact everyone, everyone in an equitable way. And so that's what I think is important to me when we talk about equity and inclusion.
And I think you bring up a good point, Caroline. Like you said, if you're encouraging, or you see someone that needs to be at the table for these conversations, is really taking the time to talk to them as far as what's holding them back from not being at the table. What have they experienced, let's say in other organizations or in other relationships, that they're fearful of coming to the table and being able to share their voice.
Yeah, and we also know, data tells us, and it shows us that it takes women and people who are minorities a little bit more help and encouragement to make that decision to be at the table. We've seen it in politics many times, that women and people of color, minorities, need that encouragement to run for office a little bit, more than what a white person or a white man would need. And so sometimes it does take talking to that mom and asking her what's holding you back from advocating for your child, or for advocating for resources, and sometimes it just takes a little bit more encouragement on our end to help them.
Well, and I think what a golden opportunity for these two nonprofits to have mentors like Rose and Christine help guide those conversations and really potentially validate some of the feelings that we bring to the table, or as an organization, that cultural piece. And how do we create safe spaces to be able to show up and be able to be proud of our heritage and our culture, and honor that, while we're at the table. And I think those conversations can occur by bringing food. I mean, I think we all
absolutely
we all the
cafecito.
Cafecito and cookies, and that can kind of break the ice, and a lot of things can get done around food, and honoring that, and honoring, like I said, once again, our heritage and who we are as human beings, and what we have to offer.
Absolutely. I think food is always a good icebreaker. It always makes people feel more comfortable, and just feel good with being feeling good about being with people that you're breaking bread with.
Yes.
So the next thing I want to kind of jump into is social justice. And the definition that we're going to be using is social justice encompasses economic justice. Social justice is the virtue which guides us in creating those organized human interactions we call institutions. In turn, social institutions, when justly organized, provide us with access to what is good for the person, both individually and in our associations with others. Social justice also imposes on each of us a personal responsibility to work with others to design and continually perfect our institutions as tools for personal and social development. So social justice, I feel like, can be a hot topic word, but I feel like it doesn't have to be. So what does it mean to you? Krystal, you want to start?
Yeah, I will start. I was gonna say, I think just the term, it takes me back, of course, to college. I think just being in this career for so many years, when you hear this term, especially social justice, again, linking it back to my multicultural college, and giving a shout out to Dr. A. Strike. Hopefully I'm going to send this podcast to her, but my gosh, did she engrave, equity and social justice and the pedagogy, which is the art of teaching, embedded into us as these future teachers and educators. But I think it's just understanding this is my, in a sense, understanding of it, what every race, trying to understand what every race experiences, culturally, what I've experienced, and not even me, but my ancestors, my upbringing, and those of, let's say, of the African American community and so forth, and seeing what they have had to, in a sense, we can use this word, fight for or advocate for themselves for so many years, and even as women, women's right, but fighting for that social justice of what we feel is right. And it's a loaded word, Caroline. I think when you said that, I was like, my gosh, I kind of turned away to see if Caroline and Abel would look at me, and sure enough, I went first, which is okay, but it can be a very loaded word and can be really intimidating, because I think you just hear that term kind of just thrown out there, but it's breaking apart, like, what does it mean? And so for me, looking at it like that, and regardless, let's say, Caroline, if I'm I'm not of the African American descent, but am I going to support and advocate those children who are of, that color and that ethnicity, to fight for whatever, let's say, within our community? Of course I'm going to stand there and be for it, because I truly feel that that's important, because that's a child, let's say, within our community, within our program, and I'm going to be there behind them to support them. But even though it has nothing to do with my race, but it's because to me, it's the human thing to do. It's the human thing to do, is to stand up for others who can't stand up for themselves, at the time, or maybe wholeheartedly, going back to that whole, equity piece as well.
Yeah, and then also I think, just working for Aprendamos, for our organization, we work with children and adolescents and individuals who have developmental delays and disabilities. And so when I think of justice from the work that we do, I think of, someone in a wheelchair who can't get to do what we get to do. Whether it's, going to the movies or going up a flight of stairs to...
Or even a playground, Caroline.
A playground, exactly. Oh my gosh, you're so right. Like kiddos in wheelchairs who may not get to go on the playground or go to the beach, and put their toes in the sand just because they can't get their wheelchair there. And so I think of, like, that's the justice part, is what is the systematic barrier that's there in the first place? What is the barrier to a child with a disability getting to go to a playground, or getting to go to the beach, or getting to drive a car? What are those barriers? And the justice part, to me, is how do we take down those systematic barriers that are in the way? Mm-hmm. That's the justice part.
And what are we doing as a community, as a society, to have them have those experience of having a playground that they can go to, going to the beach? What are we doing to support that experience for these children, and then later on as adults?
Yeah, and why was the barrier there in the first place? Did it need to even be there? Why was the barrier there in the first place? And how exactly, like you just said, Krystal, how as a society do we take down that barrier?
Well, and I think it's so important to create spaces for us to reflect and identify those barriers, and be courageous to say we potentially are creating those barriers. And I think this opportunity that we're giving nonprofits is that, have mentors in place, have a space for these courageous conversations, honoring those experiences of those that they serve, and then potentially looking at are there opportunities to remove those barriers so that people live out their dreams, specifically kids. I know many times we need to be the voice for the kids. And ultimately, we want families to have a voice at the table, but until they get there, we need to be a voice for the families. And ultimately, I want that family to have a voice, and I want to create a space for them, because kids are kids they're at a certain age, and I think we can't take that for granted, because I think if you ask any child a question, I'm sure they're going to be able to provide a very intelligent, informative answer to your question. And many times we forget about kids, you know, and I think it's important that we also ask them what they perceive maybe a potential barrier that they're encountering either at school, in the community, etc. So I think this opportunity is just going to be just an amazing opportunity for all of us, including Aprendamos and then those two nonprofits that are going to participate in this Advancing Social Equity initiative.
Yeah, I think I'm just so excited about this initiative. There's just going to be so many good things that come from this. I hope or at least that's our hope, right? That we'll just be able to share this wealth of knowledge with others. And so, anything you want to add, Abel?
No, one thing that that kind of comes to mind, Caroline, that we're talking about behaviors, and I think that I'm here today because of the behaviors that were modeled by my siblings and my mom and dad, and I'm thinking about, you know, those that potentially may not have had a voice. You know, many times my dad, like I said, and my mom were, you know, migrant farm workers, and many times I remember even during Thanksgiving, you know, my dad, we waited till those that were farm laborers ate first before we did as a family, because he knew that they didn't have a family with them during the Thanksgiving holiday. He realized that was hard because he experienced that, him and my mom. And I remember many times as a kid, you didn't understand what was happening, but it was like, no, before we eat, let's gather plates and let's take them to the migrant farm workers, and they need to eat a nice warm meal. And now I understand, you know, that he was a voice. He was, you know, doing the right thing. And sometimes we need to align our core values with the decisions that we make every day, and that's hard. It's hard, you know, because we as human beings are going to drop the ball many times, but we need that mentor to kind of nudge us and tell us that, hey, you know, what you did was wrong, or potentially was not a good response or a good decision, but you know, there's an opportunity to grow and learn. And
I think this is good a good segue into being and to reminding everyone that no one is perfect.
No.
And at some point in all of our lives, even if you are aware and you are, you know, really versed in social equity and justice and things like that, that you can still, you know, make mistakes or say the wrong thing or maybe do the wrong thing, but to just give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Because we're not perfect.
That self-compassion piece is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No, that's it. I think it's. I'm looking forward, and I encourage all of our nonprofits to really apply for this opportunity. And our vision is that these two nonprofits are really going to be the leaders, and we're going to learn. We're going to learn from each other. And my vision is that we're going to be able to have many other cohorts in the near future. And as we develop this family of cohorts, we're going to be able to learn something new every year, and that we're going to make this better and expand this opportunity to others. And just, you know, we talk about that we're going to be able to provide them a lot of mentorship from having Rose and Christine as part of this journey. But I'm looking forward to learning from the nonprofits that are part of this cohort, because I think they're going to be able to provide something to us. And like I said, it's going to be a golden learning opportunity for others in the near future. And I think this is just the first step, you know, in creating this grant opportunity, and we hope to expand it in the near future to many more nonprofits in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question, and this is the question I like to end our podcast with. What is your hope for the future?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Caroline.
I sent it to him.
Yes, I was like, Caroline, she always ends with this, and it's great. It's great just to hear. I don't know if this question was given, probably not, like, you know, at our first podcast, you know, with Abel, but I think now, you know, seeing from, you know, where this organization has started, Abel, 16 years ago, you know, Aprendamos to now, like, you know, our future is still there, and it's hopeful, and it's, you know, what can you piece apart that you're hopeful for, in connection, of course, to this initiative, but just in general for our community?
Yeah, you know, I encourage One, there's multiple things. I mean, I hope that everybody takes the time to be a mentor for others, because through this mentorship process, I truly believe that we can kind of have the opportunity to share our personal story and honor our heritage, and then be able to connect those similarities and those experiences and that honor, honor our ancestors. And then the other piece too that I think that I'm hopeful for is that we as a community will continue to encourage families, especially children, to dream big. I think there's no cost in dreaming. And I think that I'm hopeful that we can create spaces and we encourage our youth to dream big, because there's just so many possibilities. I mean, I think back, Caroline and Krystal, to my upbringing. I don't know how many times, I'm one of 9 kids, we were on the ditch banks using our imagination. People driving by thought, there's something wrong with him. I mean, because we were multiple. We carried multiple personalities. We would talk by ourselves. We would carry rakes and little shovels and create. We used our imagination. But I think that when you're encouraged to dream big, there's so many possibilities. And I think that's why I'm sitting here today, because my parents and my siblings encouraged me to dream big. And because of my community, I was able to go to school. I was encouraged to go to school. Because of my colleagues at work, they encourage me, my family, my kids, and I'm able to do what I love to do, and that's to be a mentor for others. And I encourage others to dream big. So that's what I'm hopeful for, is that we create a community where people are dreaming big, because we can really help shape what our community is going to look like in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about this grant and this initiative. I'm going to run through the details again. So if you want to apply, again, we're going to be awarding this first year. We're going to be awarding 2 nonprofit organizations $5,000 and $5,000 up front, plus the in-kind work. And the in-kind is, of course, access to our Aprendamos team and programs, access to Dr. Rose Kratzley with Ivy Child International, and also Christine Robinson, who both have worked for amazing organizations like we've mentioned. They've worked for Google, they've worked with Google, with Ford Foundation, with the Obama administration. They have a wealth of knowledge. So that's what we're awarding, the $5,000 plus all the in-kind. And if you want to apply, applications are due September 30th, 2001 by 5:00 p.m. Mountain Time. And this is for organizations that are nonprofits, 501c3s. We also encourage, tribal, native, indigenous-led organizations in our area that are 501c3s. We do encourage those organizations to apply, minority-led organizations to apply. And again, organizations, any human services nonprofit in southern New Mexico are located, Las Cruces, Doña Ana County, southern New Mexico, and with an annual operating revenue of under 1.5 million. So again, these are those smaller organizations. But we do encourage you to apply. If you want to find any information about this grant, you can check out our website, aitkids.com. At the top right, there's a green button. It says Foundation, and it'll have all the details there. You can also head over to the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, and the application is also with them.
And Caroline, it's my understanding that the application is also in Spanish for...
Yep. This was the first Spanish application I think the Community Foundation's done.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Talking about removing barriers.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
And walking the talk and in terms of, making this accessible to everybody in our community is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, if you want to check that out, the applications are in English and Spanish. If you go to our aitkids.com website, when you click on application, it actually takes you over to the Community Foundation, because everything's going to be going through their website, the application and things like that. And again, yeah, like we said, it's in English and Spanish. So really just trying to break down barriers so that everyone has an opportunity to apply. And if you need in another language, we will also, find translators to help with translating if we need to also.
Caroline, and
That's
a big
wonderful.
thank you to the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico, Tara, and all the board of directors for helping my family and I to carry out this dream of paying it forward. So kudos to the team there at the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Wonderful.
that's important to mention because this is not just an Aprendamos initiative. This is also a Covarrubias family. So we established this fund in 2020, mid-pandemic, but it's a collaboration between Aprendamos and the Covarrubias family. In fact, I think we're calling it the Aprendamos and Covarrubias Family Fund. And so, like we said, it's part of Abel's family, and Aprendamos, they're kind of leading the way and starting this endowment with the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico.
Yeah, and as you all know, I think from the first and second podcast, I was raised in a small farming community of Array, and our hopes is to pay it forward with the hope that the seeds of giving will continue to be planted and fostered in Southern New Mexico.
Yeah.
So since I'm not a farmer like my brothers, that's my way of planting seeds.
Yes, educational seats on this end.
There you go.
And I think, Krystal, we probably should disclose this. I don't think we disclosed this at the beginning, but you are related to Abel.
I am, yes. We normally don't disclose this, but I think just people who know us in the community, know that, Abel is my uncle, also my Nino, which in terms of godfather, my godfather. And so I'm just, very blessed to, of course, work at this amazing organization. And Abel has given me the opportunity when I was 17 years old to work in the file room, and I had a little, wall up because I told Abel I wanted to work at Starbucks or Target or Claire's, and he's like, just try it out, see if you'll like it. And I'm like, okay, because I've never, worked in an office job, and lo and behold, 15 years later, I never left. And I think that was a seed that Abel planted for me and the journey that I've had at Aprendamos and support, to get my degree in early childhood with multiple endorsements and really have the opportunity to say, do I want to go to the public schools or do I want to stay in this work that I love? And of course I stay in this work that I love, but it's that mentorship, like you said, Abel, that you've provided, that others have provided for me within Aprendamos that make me the professional and personal human being that I am. And so it's just amazing.
And you
because
worked
then in
in,
turn, I want to give that back.
Yeah.
That's why I started the internship at Aprendamos, because I'm like, if I in college didn't know about early intervention, through the literature and through the work that we did, I would have been lost. I knew about it because of what I worked, the place that I worked at Aprendamos. And so in turn, I want everybody at NMSU to know what early intervention, agencies and what programs do in the state of New Mexico. And so that's what planted that seed to develop an internship for early intervention at Aprendamos.
And Krystal, I remember going to one of your classes at NMSU and talking about. Do you remember that? I forget what class it was.
I do.
But one of our mutual friend that we have, Candace, invited me to go and talk at one of your classes, and it was around. My father had a lot of disabilities, and so I went in and talked to you all about what it's like to be a child growing up who has a parent who has disabilities.
Yes.
And I think those types of things, and think what you're talking about is internships and learning about services throughout the community is really important.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in college and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's just, just the variety of fields that go into, early intervention and all our other programs that we have at the Aprendamos Family of Services. And knowing that my path and track in college was to be a kindergarten or DD preschool teacher. Like I was on the teacher certification pathway, and knowing that I didn't have to be a teacher. My degree was still used in other entities like early intervention, let's say home visiting or community resources. And so it's just amazing. And I want students, not only at NMSU that we've worked with, also DACC and Western to know, that there are jobs opportunities related to our fields.
Yeah. And
so many.
Absolutely. And I really feel like this is almost an extension of our internship program. Really, we're talking about mentorship just in two kind of different vehicles, right? Like interns that's having a mentor and learning about services in our community. And then this grant initiative, again, it's the same type of mentorship. It's just a different vehicle. Now we're just kind of mentoring an organization. And so
and
really,
they're mentoring us.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think mentorship is a two-way street.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
And that's how I started Aprendamos. I started when I was in grad school as an intern for Abel. I had probably met Abel because Krystal and I have known each other, like you said, since 5th grade. I had
Yes.
probably met Abel a long
At a
time
birthday
ago.
party.
Yeah.
Not knowing. Can you imagine?
God works in mysterious ways.
I
Not
know.
knowing that you all were going to be sitting around this table having this amazing podcast.
I know.
I remember my first day walking in and like seeing Krystal
In the hallway, right?
Yeah.
I'm like,
what are you doing here?
What are you doing here? I'm like, Caroline, I work here. What are you doing here? But Caroline was, of course, working behind the scenes with Abel, and doing so much great things, within, the social media aspect, the newsletter when it was so much smaller then, but now look at
how much we've grown.
Look at how much we've grown. And
I think when I started there was just like the 4 programs, and I think MASC was still under DOH. The autism program was still under DOH, and look where we are now,
But
how much it's grown.
And I do believe that. I think, God has a plan for all of us, Abel, and it's interesting how, in some way we were all turned to come back together.
Yeah. Yep. I know. Well,
That's
this is a
amazing.
good episode.
This is great.
Yeah,
I
this
know.
is awesome.
We could probably keep talking, but we're
We
go ahead
can.
and close this out. Thank you all for listening today. This was a really great episode. I want to thank my guests, Abel, and of course my co-host Krystal, for joining me today. This is the Children and Families Podcast, and it's produced by myself, Caroline Zamora, Krystal Chavarria-Gonzalez, and Aprendamos. For more information about the Aprendamos Family of Services, you can find us online at aitkids.com. This podcast is produced on the Aprendamos podcast channel, and I want to thank you all for listening today. Be sure to check us out on Facebook at aitkids.nm or Instagram at aitkids, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. If you'd like to ask us any questions, feel free to email us at info@aitkids.com. Aprendamos Family of Services, investing in our future, one child, one family, and one relationship at a time.